It's bigger than biotech.
Hello, and welcome back to It's Bigger Than Biotech, where we explore the people, ideas, and breakthroughs shaping the future of healthcare. I'm your host, Hriday Gondalia, and today's guest is someone who's lived at the intersection of academic medicine and pharmaceutical innovation. Dr. Benjamin Suratt currently serves as the global project head and clinical lead for early development in immunity and inflammation at Sanofi, where he oversees clinical development, strategy, and execution for next generation therapeutics like lunsekimig. But before his transition into industry, Dr. Suratt spent nearly 2 decades in academic medicine as a physician scientist, tenured professor, and research lab leader focused on innate immunity and critical care. In this conversation, we explore what it really means to lead cross functional teams in global pharma company, how Dr. Suratt navigated the shift from curiosity driven academic research to milestone driven product development, and what advice he has for students or clinicians thinking about stepping into biotech or pharma. So, whether you're a student wondering how to carve out a meaningful path in medicine or a professional curious about bridging science and impact, you're going to want to hear this one. So, let's get right into it. I know you're very busy, so I just wanted to get right into it. First off, I want to ask you, you currently serve as the global project head and clinical lead at Sanofi for early development in immunity and inflammation. So could you walk us through what your role looks like on a day-to-day level and how it ties into the broader mission of the global pharma company?
Sure. No, absolutely. Well, you're actually describing two roles, and indeed, I do perform a couple of roles at least. The global project head role is one of well, we refer to it internally as being the CEO of a molecule or an asset, and what it really is directing the development of an individual drug. So I oversee a team that in any given day ranges from 50 to 70 individuals, and we are all working on a single molecule that is currently in development. In my case, it's a molecule called lunsekimig, and this is a nanobody that targets, which is a combination of single chain, heavy chain only antibodies that targets a couple of key cytokines that are active in asthma and other both allergic and non-allergic diseases. And the process really is one of running what we call a matrix. So we have multiple people who really operate in different functions altogether, but come together as a team. And I run the team, although honestly, almost none of them report directly to me. It's an interesting environment, which I could talk more about. My other role is that of clinical lead, and as clinical lead, my job is twofold. One is really being able to direct and assist the clinical research directors who report to me in their conduct of trial development and execution. So, and I'm in early development. In inflammation and immunology. And so these are all of the clinical research directors and all the clinical scientists who then are executing the trial design and the clinical development planning for multiple assets. My other role, and frankly, the reason I took this clinical lead position in the first place is that I mentor actively the individuals that report to me, which is something that carries over from my academic days.
Yes,
So
perfect. Oh,
I
uh,
was going to say, I mean, in terms of my day-to-day activities, it's there are as much as many days are similar, there are no 2 days that are the same. I spend a lot of time on Zoom. This is the reality of really most industries at this point, and pharma is no different. Even though I spent a lot of time on site in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is one of the major sites for Sanofi in the United States, I actually spend my days on Zoom calls with my colleagues from all over the world because Sanofi has more than 100,000 employees and they literally are all over the globe. So my day consists of a series, usually, of meetings. And typically, these meetings are either directed at coordinating the development of the molecule for which I'm the global project head, or interactions, particularly around giving guidance to some of the clinical research directors and other clinical development staff or folks. And that usually I can tell you that my day is heavily weighted towards the morning because half of Sanofi is in Europe. And so my afternoons slow down, hence the fact that I can talk to you right now. My afternoons slow down a bit because Europe goes home. So
Okay,
here
I
I
see.
am.
Definitely. And it's a very interesting role because you're talking to so many people abroad. Does this role include a lot of traveling by any chance, or is it now because of Zoom, just everything's online?
It's interesting. So I would say, obviously, when I took this job, which was really at the height of COVID, there was no travel, and everything was Zoom. And then in the last couple of years, travel has restarted. And so last year, for instance, I traveled a lot. I traveled all over Europe. I traveled to Japan. I traveled all over the US. And it was a significant part of my job. A lot of that is related to either going to advisory board meetings with experts, going to conferences that are relevant to our disease indications, or going to investigator meetings and talking to investigators about the trials we're running. This year so far, I've been lucky, if you will. I'm getting to the point in my life where I'm not really looking forward to traveling all the time. And so I haven't had to travel that much. Coming up, I'll be in Miami to go to an investigator meeting, and then I will be in Europe in September for a couple of weeks for conferences and other meetings. So I'm keeping it to a dull roar this year.
Okay, wow. Even though it's not a lot of traveling, you do have some events coming up, which is great to see. It's good balance. But one thing I was curious about that you mentioned in your previous answer was that you worked in academia for a very long time. And so, I mean, almost 2 decades, I believe. And
Yes.
so, what made you transition into industry? And what were the biggest mindset shifts you had to make for that?
Mm. Yeah, well, so that's a really good question and one that I've been asked many, many times. And I'm not sure I always give the same answer, to be honest with you. There are a lot of reasons I left academia. And in any given moment, I think some of them are more relevant than others. But honestly, I think the major reason I left academia was that I had gotten to a point in my career pathway in academia or in academic medicine where I really didn't see much left for me to do. That sounds kind of strange. But after 20 years and after doing, I had an NIH funded lab for all of those years, studying innate immune function in the lung and particularly the effects of metabolism. I continued, clinical practice in both the clinics and the wards and the ICU, and because I was a pulmonary and critical care physician, I guess I still am technically. And I also did a lot of administrative work, vice chair of medicine. I was the associate director of the Pulmonary and Critical Care division. I helped run the fellowship program, and I think at the end of that, I really had gotten to the point where I think the next moves would have been moves I didn't really want to make, like either go into an associate dean position or a chair of medicine somewhere. And at the same time, I also was getting I have to be honest, I was getting a bit burned out. Academic medicine has gone through a huge transition in my career. And I mean, we're still seeing the effects of it. I think COVID accelerated this. And so academic medicine has become a harder place to exist. I think people going into it now are going into it, with a much different expectation than folks like me who went into it Honestly, I graduated medical school in 1993, so it's a very long time ago. And things have changed really dramatically. I think the biggest change for me leaving academia, and I would actually add one thing to the list, and that is as an academic researcher and a clinician, one of the priorities I had, because I was always very big into applied science, applied, even when I was in undergraduate, applied science was what appealed to me. And the real reason for that is that at the end of the day, I want to make a drug that I can put into people and help people. Well, I did that approach for years in my lab, working on primarily inflammatory conditions of the lung that you see in the ICU. And a couple times I got close. I had candidate molecules. I really tried very hard to get them into clinical trials and unfortunately failed both times. And it was very frustrating. It is when you're an applied scientist, the inability to actually apply things gets frustrating. And pharma is the absolute opposite of this. Pharma is basically the application of science. I think the biggest transition for me, and this is obviously something that everybody always talks about, is that you go from a world in which, in my case, my science was my science. I picked my own topic of research. I had to get it funded by NIH. I had to make sure that I got it published. But it was really self-directed. When you go to pharma, that's not how that works, right? I mean, maybe in the early discovery part of research, there's a fair amount of that. I think when you get to the clinical development piece, which is where I live, even in early development, you're starting with molecules. You're not thinking of, I'm not designing molecules for the most part. I mean, I contribute to the discussions, but I'm not running a lab. And it's interesting because that shift gives you, in one way, it takes a little bit away from you, but it actually forces you to think strategically in a different way. So, I don't get to pick exactly what molecule, and I don't always get to pick which disease I'm going into because a lot of this stuff is really being driven at a higher level. But what you do is you begin, at least in my case, you begin to be able to see how you can move things in directions that you feel are most appropriate. So as an example of that, I mean, most people say, oh, well, you go to industry and they're going to tell you, what drug you have and what disease you're going to put it into. Well, that's not entirely true. And after about a year here, I realized that if you're really engaged and you know what you're doing, you can steer the ship. You can get a company, even the size of Sanofi, to be interested in diseases that I think, for instance, in my case, I feel there's a tremendous amount of unmet need that wasn't really being recognized. Diseases such as idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which is a horrible disease that, as a pulmonologist, I took care of for years. And when I got to Sanofi, people were not very interested in that as an indication. It's a very tough disease to tackle. It's not a huge population of patients, but it's a very important disease and causes a lot of suffering. And we have essentially no really good therapies for it. And so over the course of several years, I kind of worked around the edges, getting advisory boards together, talking about different drugs and how they might be used in that space to the point where now we have it as one of our indications in our disease area strategy. And that's really important from my standpoint because that's my contribution there in terms of what pharma does. It's not entirely they tell you what you're doing. You actually can move things yourself in pharma, even in huge pharma where I live.
Right.
So.
Definitely. And, Big Pharma is such a black box to most students. They don't know what's going on inside. But before we get into that black box and really understand what it is, I wanted to ask you one more question on the topic of your 2 decades in academic medicine. Did this background help you rise through the ranks at Sanofi? And would you recommend this path to others?
Hmm. Yeah, so yeah, let's put it this way: it's not the most efficient pathway. If that's worth discussing. 20 years in academia is maybe not what you really want to do in order to excel in pharma. It has, of course, translated into my being able to rapidly adapt to pharma. I mean, I I frequently talk about with my colleagues about how things that, and there are many of us who came from academia, and we talk about the things that we did in academia and what they translate into pharma. So we do a ton of governance in pharma, and so governance is the process by which we go to the upper levels of management and we explain what it is we're planning to do, what we want to do, what drug we want to put into what disease, and how we're going to do it, the trial designs, how much it's going to cost. And that process turns out to be very much like writing a grant, and defending a grant. Almost identical skill set. Different format. I mean, I work in PowerPoint now as opposed to Word, so I've shifted in Office a little bit. But it's the same basic premise. And responding to, governance feedback is like getting a grant review back or a paper review, and how you respond and how you move forward is a skill set that you learn in academia because that's what you do all the time too. Working in the matrix that we talk about is also very similar to medicine. I mean, I was an intensivist as a critical care physician for all of the time that I was in academia. And I would run the intensive care unit. And in the intensive care unit, I mean, nobody actually technically reports to me. Everybody, we are all a team, and I ran the team. But there were multiple functions there. There were nurses, respiratory therapists, dietitians, physical therapists, residents, fellows, and none of them technically reported to me. Like I couldn't fire anyone, not that I wanted to, but it was just not like a typical kind of reporting structure that you would have. And yet you had to come together as a team, and you had to have a team leader, and I was the team leader. And so the way you manage is a little bit different in that setting, and it's true in pharma as well. I mean, when I run 50 to 70 people on a drug, I have to use soft power. I have to manage the development of the drug in a way in which I am looking to on the team advisors, informers, and then ultimately decision makers, of which I'm the kind of the highest. And I have to explain my decisions in a way that if I were, a CEO at a bank, I probably wouldn't have to. But it is, it is again a derivative almost for me of my time in academia. It is academia teaches you many, many skills, but it's not necessary to do academic medicine to be in pharma. There are many other pathways, and as I say, there are a lot of them that are quite a bit shorter. I mean, for clinical development, really the background tends to be if you want to do actual clinical trial development, you really, for the most part, you have to have a physician degree, whether it's an MD or a DO. And bare minimum generally is you have to have completed a residency. There are a few that have just done residency. Most of us did subspecialty. And so that's from back to back, that's like from medical school all the way through to fellowship. That's about a decade worth of training. And that's probably our rank and file clinical developers or CRDs, clinical research directors. There are, however, other positions within clinical development, such as the clinical scientists, who actually spend a lot of their time really just executing trials. They have less of a strategic role and more of an effecting role. They tend to be PharmDs. They can be really any kind of advanced degree coming in. When we get to some of the roles on the, kind of not in the heart of the clinical development, like my role currently as a global project head, I'd say where I am, the global project heads are probably evenly distributed among PhDs, and usually in biomedical sciences, MDs, and then PharmDs. So any of those, end up being, I think, appropriate for the job. Um, Outside of that, then, though, there are a lot of pathways. As we discussed before, if you, are interested in doing strategy, and a lot of that strategy happens outside of the clinical development bubble. It's in commercial, it's in market access, it's in medical affairs. The pathway there is different. Often it's again PhDs with degrees in biomedical sciences. A lot of them are MBAs. But then there are a fair number of people who've come to us through just a bachelor's, and I don't mean to say just a bachelor's. I think a bachelor's is plenty, but they typically have then spent some time in consulting. So this is another major track to come into pharma, particularly big pharma. You can go to biotech and probably, I mean, when I graduated from college, I actually went to biotech. I had my bachelor's and I went and I worked as a protein chemist at a company in Boston before I went to medical school. But to be in the kind of strategic positions, it's generally going to be if you're coming from a bachelor's, you're going to do a few years in consulting before you end up coming to pharma. I'm struck, except in the research, the preclinical research area, so like the lab science, I'm struck by the lack of people who typically have just a bachelor's.
Mhm.
Generally, everybody pretty much has an advanced degree, unless, as I say, they've done some time in consulting.
I see. I know in our previous conversation, you summarize this into two separate paths. One is you either, to get into big pharma, you either gain experience and then you come into big pharma, or you gain a degree, which is a very
Yes.
advanced degree, and then you come into big pharma. So there's like those two paths are very common. And the other one is, of course, like consulting, which is an interesting path for sure.
Yeah.
But in your response, you throw out quite a few pieces of jargon, which is the matrix and governance. For a few of
Mm.
the students who don't know what that means, what is the matrix
Yes.
you're talking about, and
Well,
what?
the Matrix is not what Neo inhabited. The Matrix, although the first time I heard about the Matrix, I was interviewing at Novartis, and they talked to me about being in the Matrix, and I have to say I did a double take because I'd not heard the term used that way before, and it took them actually a little bit of time to explain it to me because I was like, "What are you talking about?" But I mean, I don't know, red pill, blue pill, whatever. It's not that. So the matrix really is this concept that you have a just an extraordinarily multidisciplinary team. So on my team, as I say, I've got, anywhere between 50 and 70 people, depending on really the day. And of my core team, so the leadership team within my team, there are, I think, ten of us or so. Um, and each one of those represents a discrete function in pharma. So the functions are things like clinical development, what we call CMC, which is production of a drug, regulatory, so dealing with health authorities and regulations, operations, how do we actually do these trials? How do we get sites set up, enroll patients, execute the studies. Project management. Basically, these are the guys that keep the trains running on time. And that's an incredibly critical part of what we do. And project management is a field unto itself. And each of these functions is really a discrete discipline where people spend years learning how to do these things. And we all come together in this. And then there's pharmacovigilance, which is safety. There's legal. There's trying to think who else is in. Oh, commercial, obviously. Commercial, market access, which is so commercial is dealing with commercialization of the drug, kind of selling the drug to patients and providers. Market access is actually selling the drug to the people who actually buy the drugs, right? Which are the pharmaceutical benefit companies, for instance. Um, all of us, and medical affairs, which is the people who deal with kind of the trajectory of the marketing of the drug over time. All of us come together in a single team. And as I mentioned earlier, all people report actually to other bosses. But in the team, there is this structure, and that is the matrix. That it's this non-org chart organization. For lack of a better description, it is a matrix. That's why I use the term now, because it's a little bit hard to explain to people who aren't familiar with that. That's why I also use the example of the ICU, because most people can get their brain around. You see a bunch of docs rounding in the ICU. Well, and there's the nurse, and oh, there's the guy who like fiddles with the knobs on the ventilator. Well, it's the same idea. None of those people report to the physician running the team. They all report to their own structures within the hospital. But in that moment, in that ICU, they're working as a team, and there is a reporting structure of sorts. So, what was your other question there? I can't
The
remember
other
now.
question was, what is governance?
Oh, governance. Yeah. So governance is the process of basically bringing anything that you are planning to do to a decision. So, in other words, and there are multiple layers of governance. This is true really in any industry, but it's particularly true in pharma and very true in big pharma. Governance is serves a bunch of functions, and it largely is delineated around kind of what kind of permission you're seeking. So, in other words, there are things like clinical strategy review, which really has solely to do with whether your plan for the development of a drug, in terms of your clinical trial design, things like that, whether that makes sense to people, as a group, most of whom are going to be fairly experienced clinical developers. There's a commercial committee you go to where, your clinical development plan is looked at from the aspect of, is this a worthwhile investment of the money and effort, into a drug to be able to capture a certain part of a market, an indication, a disease. Is this the right way to do it? As you go further up, as I always tell people, it gets further and further from the science and closer to the money. Each time you go up, it gets closer to, are we going to cut a check for this? And so ultimately, at the highest level of governance, which in our case includes a meeting with the CEO of the entire organization, that's all about, are we gonna spend our money on this? And so you can imagine that each of these different governance meetings is very different. They're all on a kind of almost a linear approach in a sequence, but they're very different meetings, and you prepare for them often quite differently. But at the end of the day, you take your kind of early plans about how you want to actually ask and answer, whether this drug might work in this disease, all the way through to, are we going to pay hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes to actually execute this plan to develop this drug for this indication or disease?
I see. And usually these government governance meetings are very important because you're developing a multi-billion dollar drug. And I know like
Yes.
the funding requirements must be very high. So managing and asking for that massive check, is it a lot of pressure usually? And do you have imposter syndrome sometimes?
Well, I think we all have imposter syndrome. I don't trust anybody who says they don't. I mean, as I think I mentioned before, I view some of these governance meetings as if you walk a little, you're up on a roof and you're looking at the horizon, and it's actually quite a view, and you get too close to the edge of the roof and you look down and you have that kind of vertiginous feeling where you kind of go, oh. That's kind of what happens to me sometimes is, I mean, I look at the roll up on the budget sheet and I'm like, oh my God, how did I end up here? The ask can be enormous. And I think you do have a little bit of a reflection at that point about exactly, okay, how did I get here? How are they allowing me to make these decisions? Um, the reality is that I don't think you ever completely get comfortable in your skin. I never did in academic medicine, and I did that for 20 plus years. And it's the same thing for pharma. I mean, I still have moments where I say, oh, I don't really know if I'm doing this the right way, or even if I know how to do this. But that's the beauty of kind of lifelong learning and being in an environment where you trust the people you work with. Because for me, and one of the most important things for me when I was in academia and then in pharma was making sure that I was going to be working with people I trusted and people who I thought would teach me. Above me, below me, people teach me all day, every day. And it takes a certain mindset to be able to keep yourself open to that. But that's really the only way you can do it. You have to be open to the possibility that you, A, may be wrong, B, may not know what you're doing. It's important to do that because people who decide that their way is the only way, particularly when it's in an uninformed decision, that's very perilous. You can really run things into the ground there. And when things run into the ground in pharma, they can run into the ground in a pretty spectacular fashion. I mean, because you are talking about a lot of money, a lot of work. I mean, it is, you want the best decisions to be made. And so even though, as I say, I'm not always sure that I'm the most confident person about, any given thing. For instance, I always tell the statisticians on my team that I'm a stats idiot because I am a stats idiot. I know enough to get myself in trouble with statistics. I know student t-tests. I could do an ANOVA. But that's about the limit of my, that's kind of where the earth ends for me. And these guys are amazing. I mean, like, I'm blessed because I have a fantastic stats team. I trust them. They trust me. We work well together. If something comes to me, like when we deal with health authorities and they say, well, we're worried about the S demand and, your coefficient of variation, blah, 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 and I just go, what do you think? And the stats person just jumps right in. Um, it would be a mistake for me to try to answer that question, honestly. I mean, I could probably muddle my way through it, but why? I've got somebody who's that's their job. They know what they're doing. So,
Right. Yeah, to that point, honestly, a lot of students wonder whether they should specialize early in their career or be generalists.
mm,
And I know your role requires both in some way. You need to be a generalist, need to be able to work in different aspects while also being a specialist in your own field. So, what would you recommend that students do
mm.
get into a position where you are at right now?
Yeah, well, I've already said that I wouldn't recommend necessarily following the pathway I did. I think
Okay.
it's the long way around, to say the least. I think, the most important thing to me, and this is something that always troubles me when I talk to my son or my daughter, or I interact with folks who are, in their undergraduate careers or even high school, frankly, is that these days there seems to be more and more of an emphasis on deciding who you're going to be from day one. And you know, there are unique individuals who can. There are people who just they wake up and they say, "I'm going to be X," and then that's their life, and they're happy and they're well balanced, and that's how they do it. Those are the exception, honestly. Most of us muddle around for quite some time. I started college as a Spanish major. I was going to do Spanish lit. Then after a couple of years of that, I decided to do political science. That lasted about a semester. Then I went to biology, then to chemistry, and ultimately ended up doing an interdisciplinary major in biochemistry and immunology. And my thesis was on catalytic antibodies. So I don't think you get too, like, I mean, those are so diametrically opposed ends of something, and that happened in 4 years. And I did not suffer for it at all. I mean, it didn't hurt me. If anything, it strengthened me to have all of those interests, to have all of those experiences. I mean, you could say, well, what about those 2 years you spent as a Spanish major? Well, I mean, the entire time I was a practicing physician, I had a Spanish speaking clinic. I mean, there you use everything you learn. The only mistake you can make is actually not using what you've learned. Like everyone talks about mistakes they've made in their lives and their careers and everything. I don't really think they're mistakes. I mean, clearly there are mistakes. Don't get me wrong. But most of what people call mistakes are actually just opportunities they took that didn't, end up being a major branch point in their life. Like they didn't actually end up going all the way down to the end of that branch. But you learn so much every time you take one of these roads. You really, I mean, it's what makes you who you are, and it's that experience that you bring to bear in any job. The trick is recognizing what you've learned and understanding that you can apply it. I mean, I did for years. I mean, my son, can graduate in computer science. I did computer science for years. I mean, in high school and even through college. It's actually how I paid for part of my tuition. Um, and my son used to say to me that I was an idiot for not going into computer science. So, well, because you were there early, you could have done something, amazing. And I'm like, well, I still actually use the same skills. I mean, when I'm troubleshooting our electronic case record form, which is basically a way that we capture all the data from a trial on a form in a computer, I understand how the back of that is working. And so I can talk to these folks at these vendors. I mean, look, the logic is off on this. You need to fix the logic, right? Nobody else that I work with is going to do that because nobody has that background. But that's just background I have. I happen to be able to recognize these things, and everybody brings all of those kinds of skills to bear when you're working in an environment like this. unless you're making, widgets in a factory, I don't see how anybody's job doesn't incorporate, if not all of their experiences, a significant amount of their experiences before. And so, I brought all my experience to bear in medicine. I'm bringing it all to bear in pharma. And I think, I think that the most important thing you can do is chase the opportunities and not be afraid about, maybe this isn't the best way to do things. Yeah, I mean, do things, do them wide-eyed open, right? Like just make sure you understand what you're doing, and know how to recognize when maybe that is not the way you want to end up going. Like, you have to make decisions in the moment, make those decisions, but always be aware that you may want to revise your thinking later. Very few things are fatal. Like you just keep going, you keep doing it. I mean, I lose time, and I took a year off after medical school, or after undergraduate, and I worked as a protein chemist. That year was spent figuring out what I wanted to do. I didn't know whether I wanted to go to medical school or get a PhD. Like half my friends did one, half did the other. I took a year off after residency before my subspecialty fellowship training. I worked actually back in computer science. I worked for a health software company. Um, Again, incredibly useful. I ran a team there. It's one of the ways I learned how to run teams. These experiences, they count. So I don't know if that helps.
Oh, that helps a lot. That helps a lot because one thing I recognize is it's not about overthinking things, it's about doing, it's about action. And the more you
Mm.
do, the more you learn. And everything just correlates to more knowledge overall.
Yes,
Um,
yes. I think I'm first and foremost, I'm an experiential learner. And so, not everybody is going to be the same way. I'll be the first to admit it. But a lot of people are experiential learners. And so that experience is really where you're learning. And so you need to have lots of experiences.
I completely agree. And talking about a lot of experiences for students, let's just dive into recruitment aspect of big pharma. You're a recruiter as well in some sense because you're building teams, you're maintaining them, you're even firing people. So, what are some skills you look for in people you hire, technically and soft skills? And also, like, why would you fire someone?
Yeah. I'm going to save that last question for last. So yeah, I mean, I do a lot of recruiting. I do recruiting internally. So I pull people, to my team from other teams. It's usually a friendly activity. Sometimes people aren't really happy when you have someone stolen from your team, but it's okay. It's all good fun. Um, but in terms of external recruitment, I think most people here would agree that the most important thing you have is you have somebody who is curious, who's interested in learning, and someone who is going to work hard. Because we can debate whether medicine is harder than pharma, pharma is harder than whatever. I mean, a job's a job. And I'd be surprised if anybody I work with does not work hard. I mean, we all work hard. Medicine at times I think was beyond hard, but in pharma, you do work hard. This is not, you do not mail it in here. And so you really want somebody who wants to learn, who wants to work hard. And the kind of soft pieces of this are you need somebody who knows, at least on some level, how to work as a team. Solitary players in pharma, you could work some jobs here, but the vast majority of jobs here, you have to be used to working on a team. And that's one of the things that I do like about the current undergraduate environment is that, and unlike when I was an undergraduate, they really seem to put a premium on teams and team building and team execution. And that really reflects the reality of life for most people. You really need to understand how to work with other people, how to, I don't want to say subsume, but how to be part of a team and not your own piece. You're, it's not quite like being assimilated into the Borg, but you have to be oftentimes secondary to the team. The team is the team, and you are part of the team. And that is critical. And in fact, to flip to the last question, the only person I have had to fire so far in pharma was somebody who just very bright person, um, hard worker, could not work effectively on a team. Um, and there's just not a role here in clinical development for somebody who can't work on a team. It's not a value judgment. It's not a pejorative even. It's that's the job. If you can't do the job, you can't do the job. And so I really do believe that the amount of teamwork, and teamwork, as you well know, teamwork also is eye-opening, right? You find out that some of your teammates don't do a damn thing, right? You learn how to deal with those situations. That learning is really important. Understanding how you navigate when you have somebody who's just doesn't show up. How do you navigate when somebody just tries to dominate? How do you adapt? How do you drive things forward? How do you negotiate, reach agreements, execute? Uh, that's important. I mean, that's really important. So, I think we look for people who show evidence of being able to be a team member, and I think we value very much the ability to think on your feet and to express yourself well. One of the requirements we have for every hire in clinical development is that they give us a 20-minute presentation. It can be on anything they want, but it is actually a pretty critical piece of the interview process. We need to be clear that you can convey information clearly, logically, in an organized fashion, and that most importantly, at the end of your talk, you can field questions. I mean, we don't do the classic medical school apocryphal thing where they nail the window shut and they say, "Could you open the window?" And the person can't open the window and they lose their mind. We're not like that. We're not trying. It's not a gotcha. It's a like asking questions and seeing how people handle things on their feet, because this job and most other jobs, you have to be able to think on your feet. You're constantly called upon to be able to make decisions and make good decisions, and being able to answer questions after a talk is like a it's like a mini essay of how that works. So
See, I see. Yeah, very important skills indeed. I know, like working with my teammates during class project could be a pain in the ass, but at least I'm learning something. So that's good to hear.
I wasn't gonna go that far, but yes, yes, and trust me, it doesn't go away either. I mean, I have been on teams that were really very difficult to work with. Even in my current location, I have had some teams that were truly dogs. It happens. Sometimes it's chemistry, sometimes it's just the phase of the moon. I don't understand it, but because if I've worked with a lot of these people in other teams and they're fine. It's just that particular team, it just didn't gel. And that's one of those soft skills that you have as a leader, as a manager, is understanding how to put a team together and how to get the best out of everybody on a team. That is a skill, and that's not something that that takes years to. I believe it takes years to develop that. And you see people who are fantastic at it, and you see people who are terrible at it.
Right.
But I'd rather work for one of the fantastic ones.
Yeah, fair enough. And yeah, like very important skills, but also like I know with big pharma, students have a lot of misconceptions about recruiting. So like
Mhm.
what are the biggest misconceptions students or maybe even anyone coming into big pharma has? And
Yeah.
yeah, what would you like to address?
Sure. Well, the first thing I would say is, for better for worse, networking is critical. I mean, I don't want to suggest that everybody in pharma is a nepo baby. In fact, very few people are, honestly. But a lot of people, especially people kind of in college, coming out of college, are under the impression that if they work hard enough and they do well enough, that is what's going to get them a job. And in honesty, that should be what gets you a job, but that's not. I mean, you have to have that. That's the opening bid, right? If you don't have that, it's very hard for you to get past go. I will say that we all, and one of the reasons that a lot of people shy away from networking actively is there's always the example of somebody who really isn't that good and doesn't work that hard, who gets a job solely through networking, and it puts a bad spin on the whole thing and everybody, and that's when we start talking about nepo babies. But the reality is that you need both. You need to be somebody who is really good at what they do, works really hard, but also understands the importance of connections. And it's really not in a bad, it's not a pejorative, it's not a bad thing. It's important because networks and networking help you identify the most appropriate place for you to be. I mean, if you think about it, the people that you know who like you are going to be similar to the people who they know who like them, who then you might want to work for. So it's almost like a pre-screen. The way I think about it, it's more of it's like a hidden interview. You're being introduced to people because somebody likes you and somebody likes them, and therefore it's a transitory process. And it's really important to leverage that. I think people shy away from it because they think it's either dirty or it's hard. It is hard. I'll give you that. But it is also critically important. And looking for these opportunities is, I mean, so the equivalent for us in academic medicine, so I used to run promotions and tenure for the Department of Medicine for over a decade. Equivalent there is that you have to have, when you go up for promotion, you have to have these things called arm's length letters. And these are letters from people that you have not met, that you have not published with, you do not know them. And they have to write an evaluation of you for promotion. So think about that. That's like a cold call to say, am I worthy of promotion? That's really hard to do, right? But it's networking. It's networking. It's knowing people and having people know who you are in whatever sphere it is. And you meet somebody at a conference, you click. You haven't published with them. They didn't train you, maybe they would be a good arm's length letter. You always, I always used to tell the faculty, the junior faculty, is like, look, starting now, every time you do anything, if you run into somebody who, is a world expert in whatever, whatever you're doing, and you click, keep in touch. They may be somebody who can write you a letter. It's the same thing with finding a job. You know somebody, but they know some other people. I mean, the ultimate is LinkedIn, right? You go into LinkedIn and you can see how many degrees separate you from everybody. I use that all the time. I mean, I'm not looking for a job at this point, but I mean, if I want to find somebody who's in a certain area, I just look and see who my friends know. And if you work well with other people, it is extraordinarily rare that somebody will not help you make a connection. Most of us want to help people make connections, particularly people who don't have any connections, people who are coming out of school. And if you come out of a big school, it's counterintuitively to me at least. I think it's even harder to have those connections because like I came out of a small school and I knew all my professors. One of my professors is the one who actually got me my first job in Boston, right? I mean, I'm not going to kid anybody. I would never have been able to apply for that job and get that job. That was because my professor, really liked working with me and called his friend who he had done his postgraduate work with and said, "Hey, I've got somebody good." That's how I got the job. Um, and the same thing is going to apply, anywhere. But at a large, really large school, you have fewer of those interactions with professors. Like a lot of it is with graduate students. Graduate students don't have the same networking, right? But you have an alumni network that is, I mean, USC's alumni network is amazing, right? I mean, I went to Amherst College and our alumni network is great, but it's not USC. So it's a matter of how you look at networking and how you can use it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. That networking is so important because you never know who you might meet later, who can help you out, or if there's a situation where someone can help you out. But one thing I hear from professionals is that network with professionals. What about networking with your peers while in school?
Mm,
Is that impactful at all?
yes, absolutely. I mean, It's impactful for a couple of reasons. One is the obvious, which is like, well, I mean, if your peer's dad happens to run a company you want to work for, that's a good networking move. That's the obvious one. But I think the more realistic one is that it's a skill. It's a skill like any other. And I didn't really learn networking until I was in medical school, and then I really learned it. And I don't know why. I don't know why I had to be in medical school to suddenly, see the relevance there, or probably more importantly, to become comfortable with the concept. Because I was one of these people who was just like, I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to do really well, and people will recognize this. Well, life doesn't always work that way. People are not really looking. They don't see your GPA. They don't know what your thesis was on. Like that's just not something that you don't have like a glowing letters on you that give this away. And so you learn the value of being again, networked, being, and it's the same thing as teamwork in many ways. It's just being able to connect with people, and so when I left academia for pharma, I mean, I reached out to my friends. I have friends from multiple, generations of my training. I have friends from college. I have friends from medical school. I have friends from residency. I have friends from fellowship. And I just reached out to them. Half of them, had gone off to pharma, and they were like, "Oh, let me introduce you to so and so," or they send an email or whatever. That all starts when you're in college. That ability to be able to, you know, really network with just your friends or, acquaintances. I don't know. I don't know how better to describe it. I think it's just part of the human, of human nature that just happens to serve people really well when they are then trying, as life goes on to navigate. And it's also like it's a support structure. I mean, I don't know. I blur the line between friendship and networking. I think I network off my friends all the time, and likewise. But it's
Yeah.
all kind of rolled together for me.
Yeah, I agree with you that networking with friends, peers, acquaintances is very important. And also one more thing I was curious about, specifically with your career, you must have had so many opportunities that you might have to turn down over your career or accept over your career. What is your thought process behind accepting or rejecting a opportunity?
Hmm.
Because I feel like most students struggle with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, just based on what I've told you so far, I I haven't often turned down opportunities. It's not always been great, by the way. I mean, I'm one of these people who tends to be oversubscribed. I tend to say yes to too many people.
Mhm.
And in academia, I was really that way. I mean, I used to give a talk on how to say no to people, which was ironic because I couldn't. But I think when it comes to opportunities and looking at them, I think there are dimensions that you have to consider. I think probably the most important one is this something that interests you? Because there are rare times when you're going to have to do something that really is just not interesting and not something you want to do, but you have to do it, right? And that's because strategically, politically, there's a reason for it, and you just suck it up and you do it. But most of the time, you're going to have opportunities that you're going to say, "Ooh, I would really like to do this." And if you want to do something, odds are you're going to do it well. It's just how things are. The other consideration then, of course, after that should be, is this just, even though I want to do it and it's going to be enjoyable to me, is it serving any other function in my life? So is it strategically a good move? Is it politically a good move? Am I positioning myself by doing this for another job, a promotion, a greater recognition within the university or the company? Um, I don't think anybody should. I mean, you have to, at the end of the day, you have to be aware of the kind of the strategic and political ramifications of any decision you make. I would argue that you should try not to make those the primary reasons that you do things, for two reasons. One is you'll end up doing stuff you don't want to do, and odds are you won't be very happy about it. You may not do it very well, and that doesn't serve you at all. The other is that the people who tend to focus on doing things for political and strategic reasons only tend to be the people that, frankly, a lot of us just hate. So, I mean, you don't really want to be the conniving person. Life's full of them. I mean, that's just life. But I think most of us really enjoy working with people who are doing all these things because they genuinely find them interesting, or they really feel that they're important. And so I think that's the way to think about it. You have to be really careful that you don't overextend yourself. This is something that I think is probably my greatest mistake, is that I've routinely, I don't do it as much anymore. This one thing I've learned in my first career, is the perils of overextension. You burn out. Suddenly everything you do becomes no fun, which is really not a good place to be. And so you have to be careful that you're not going to get yourself overextended in all of this. How do you do that? I'm not always sure. I mean, I think if you find that you just are having a hard time finishing anything, or you're not doing everything as well as you'd like to, that should be a warning sign that you may need to try to figure out either a different way of doing things or maybe give up something. Um,
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's a problem for most students because they're trying to diversify so much and grab onto so many opportunities.
Well,
Um,
unfortunately, these days, I think we've institutionalized it. I mean, so I used to be on the interview committee for the medical school, and all the things that, back several decades ago used to be kind of surprising and interesting about a candidate, they've become routinized. I mean, now you have to go and like be in a free clinic, and you have to have done some kind of research, and you have to have, and everybody then consequently views all these things as check boxes that they have to check. And it really just ruins the whole enterprise. It's no fun. There's no real good reason for anyone to do these things. It becomes an expectation and a requirement as opposed to something that differentiates you because of your interests. I don't know how to fix that, honestly. It's like an arms race. Everybody's got to do, like, everybody has to have cured AIDS, before they can apply to medical school. And it's like, oh my God. I used to kid the people out at UVM when I was on the admissions committee that I wouldn't have gotten into UVM. Like, I honestly, I can tell you straight up, I would not have gotten into medical school when I was on the admissions committee. Wouldn't have happened.
Wow. Yeah, it definitely seems like everything's just getting so much more competitive because of higher education access. Like everything is, yeah, like you said, it is an arms race out there. So definitely very, very intimidating as a student. But moving on to more future outlook side of things, like what excites you the most about the future of immunology and inflammation research, both in terms of science and patient impact? And
Mm.
yeah, you know what? And I'll ask you another question after my
All
final.
right. Yeah, well, I think it's an amazing time. Honestly, I mean, obviously, I drank the Kool-Aid. Here I am, working at Sanofi. But I think it's an amazing time to be in this field. I think we are finally getting to the point where we are able to truly do logical design. It is something that we've talked of, dreamt of for 100 years. And now we're actually on the cusp of really being able to do this, whether it's with these tailored mRNA, vectors, CRISPR, or even just the more routine monoclonal antibodies. We're getting to a point where we're not only basically saying, oh, I can hit this and we get this effect, but we're actually beginning to think strategically and scientifically about what you put together. Like if you want to target a diseases, I mean, the body is incredibly complex. I don't need to say any, I mean, this goes without saying. What the consequence of that is that nothing, I mean, there are rare genetic diseases, but other than those, there's really no disease that is a single thing. It is always the result of multiple perturbations to your normal physiology. Your homeostatic system is off kilter, and it doesn't come back on kilter. So, like, what is it? What do you like? You target one thing. Well, targeting one thing can be very effective. Like, look at the TNF alpha inhibitors. They're amazing drugs, right? But now we're beginning to go beyond that. We're beginning to say, well, what if you put TNF alpha with IL-23? What if you were to put, in my case, TSLP, which is an alarmin, with IL-13, which is a type 2 cytokine? And now we're seeing tri-specifics, and it's going beyond that. And the other development that is really, I think, overdue is this notion of it used to be called patient-centered medicine or personalized medicine. I I I I hate calling it that because I don't know. It has an association for me that I don't really care for. I think for me, it's more like recognizing heterogeneity in disease. The most important thing to understand about disease is disease, generally speaking, is a syndrome. We think of disease as being a defined set of irregularities in your biology, whatever you want to call it. But most diseases like asthma are syndromes. There are many different biologies that go into asthma. And so when we take a drug and we say, well, this ought to work in asthma, we throw it in asthma, and we find out that half of the people don't respond to the drug. We say, well, that drug sucks. Well, that's actually probably not true. That drug was great for the 50% that responded, sucked for the ones who didn't, right? We're at the point now where we're getting better at understanding how to figure out who the 50% are that respond. And that's the heterogeneity of it. That's the endotyping, the phenotyping, that piece of pharma right now, along with this kind of multi-specific, multimodal approach. Those two things together are the most exciting things in pharma for me. And actually, it's what drew me in the first place. I mean, it's a great time to do this. I really do feel like we're going to have some breakthrough medicines soon. I mean, you've already seen it when we could debate about like the COVID vaccines and things like this. We've seen some amazing breakthroughs in the last few years. I mean, truly amazing. And CRISPR is another one of these. Like, I'm not sure they're ever going to be able to pay for CRISPR, but fixing sickle cell anemia, that blows my mind, right? I mean, when I was a medical student, the first disease you get taught in medical school is like sickle cell anemia because it's a very elegant way of introducing you to all the concepts of pathophysiology. It's a mutation. It gives you misfolding. The idea that we could actually now fix it, but fix it completely is just
Yeah. I completely agree with you. Yeah, there's like a lot of innovation happening that even the industry and payment structure doesn't know how to keep up with, which we know we're at the point of.
there are growing pains, yeah, and they're gonna get worse. And I don't ask me because I don't have an answer for you there.
Yeah.
I mean, we're way out over our skis right now, and I'm not sure how this ends. But I mean, the exciting part for me is just the fact that we're moving in this direction and that we can do this because, I mean, it's not like, we're not chewing willow bark because we have, jaw pain or taking foxglove because we've got swollen feet. We're really getting into this kind of intelligent design piece, which is really, I think it's so exciting.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And now my final question to you is, what is one piece of advice, or how many other pieces of advice you'd like to give a student who wants to be a global head of a big pharma company for a drug in the future?
Uh, don't do what I did. It'll take you forever to get there. I think my first and foremost, and it's advice that I've essentially given already, which is really don't sweat it. I mean, it's easy for me to say, right? I mean, everybody's always like, "Yeah, great, thanks." But I mean it. You're, I have seen so many people make so many mistakes and screw so many things up and been better for it. So as an example, when I was in college, one of my really good friends and I used to study together for organic chemistry, and I just loved organic. I mean, like it tells you a lot about me and my psychopathology. I loved organic chemistry, and I did really well in organic chemistry. It just was something that it's like there are things in life you just see, right? I mean, like some people just see economics and others are like, what the hell? Well, I just saw organic chemistry. So we studied together, da, 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 da. I did extremely well. He got a D minus. We both were at the time thinking about whether we'd go to medical school, and he'd actually decided he wanted to. And I remember we went to the professor's office after the exam had been reported, and actually it was a final, and so we went to the professor's office, and I mean I was just with him because it was after lunch or something, and he goes in and talks to the professor, and he comes out and he goes, I don't know how to deal with what he told me, and I was like, well, what did he tell you? He said, well, look, this is my first semester teaching organic chemistry, and I couldn't give anybody an F. I just couldn't. Even if you failed, I didn't give anyone an F. But I want you to know, I was talking to my friend, I want you to know that you actually earned the D minus. And my friend was like, okay, so great. I didn't actually fail. I really got a D minus. But what am I going to tell my parents? Like I earned the D minus? And it's a good point. I don't know what that conversation looks like. Good news, folks. I earned the D minus. But my point would be that the guy is an extraordinarily successful OBGYN in Denver. So did it kill him? This is the thing that's supposed to be the end of your career, is like you get a D in orgo. It's over. Oh my God. No, I think he might have had to repeat it over the summer or something like that. I mean, bad things happen. They don't always happen for any reason. I just don't. You have your whole lives ahead of you. Don't sweat this stuff. Like just pick yourself up, figure out, how you don't do that again, and keep moving. And that's what I would tell myself because I was the same guy back then. I was like, just overwhelmed with everything. And oh my God, what if this? What if that? And now in retrospect, I'm like, man, none of it matters. It matters so much at the time and so little in retrospect.
Yeah, it's
But if
very.
you can even just a little bit of that, a little bit of the like, you know what, I'm going to cut myself a break. This is not the outcome I was looking for, but you know what? I'll be better for it. I'll think about why this happened. I will learn from what did happen. I will maybe you even learn something in the process. You just kind of, as I said earlier, I think a lot of life is just figuring out what you learn from your experience. That's the value of everything, is just saying, okay, what did this teach me? There are very few things that happen that you can't learn from.
Right.
It's just a question of whether you will.
Okay. Yeah. Very, very introspective piece of advice, and I hope students take it and move along their career and become
I mean,
global.
I'd love to be able to like give you the secret key, to life, but I don't have it. Okay. I mean, I'm still making it up as I go along as well. We
Right.
still talk, even I'm like going to be 60 next year, and I've got a lot of friends and, at work, and we say, well, what are we going to be when we grow up? That tells you. I might be a fireman. I don't know. I haven't decided.
Well, yeah, and that's a good mentality to go with. It's a growth mindset, and so you never settle. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for your time,
Of
Dr.
course.
Martin. I really appreciate it. And yeah, that's a wrap for this episode. All
Thank you
right.
for having me. I really enjoyed this.
That's it for today's episode of It's Bigger Than Biotech. A huge thank you to Dr. Benjamin for sharing his insights on leadership, purpose, and navigating the evolving landscape of immunology and pharmaceutical innovation. From lessons learned in the ICU to leading global development teams at Sanofi, his journey is a reminder that careers in medicine and biotech don't have to follow a straight line. They just have to be aligned with impact. So, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow, rate, and share with a friend. And stay tuned for more conversations with the people driving the future of science and health. Until next time, I'm Hriday, and this is It's Bigger Than Biotech.